Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
We're back with episode 73 of the Leo Training Podcast. And this week's guest is Dr. Carol Addy, Chief Medical Officer for HMR Weight Management Service Corporation. Dr. Addy is a physician executive who has served as a champion of wellness for over 30 years. Her professional experience has permitted her the opportunity to share her passion for lifestyle and to optimize outcomes for individuals and populations using an evidence-based, data-driven approach. As a former professional cyclist and health and fitness spokesperson, she gained an appreciation of the health benefits of physical activity and proper nutrition, and as an internist endocrinologist, she shared this knowledge with her patients as a powerful and cost-effective means of disease prevention and as an adjunct to cardiometabolic disease treatment. Most recently, Dr. Addy accepted the position of Chief Medical Officer at HMR Weight Management Service Corporations, a fully owned subsidiary of Merck. In this role, she is responsible for providing medical oversight and subject matter expertise for the delivery of lifestyle-based behavioral interventions for weight loss and long-term weight management. Given her strong background as a physician and scientist, she maintains a strong interest in research and seeks opportunities for collaboration in data analytics and outcomes research. She has considerable experience speaking and presenting at conferences and meetings, as well as interacting with C-suite executives to make the business case for health. So in this episode, Dr. Addy and I discuss her background as a pro cyclist and kettlebell sport athlete, her current role at HMR, how she's been known to write prescriptions for exercise versus drugs, and she provides plenty of actionable tips around weight loss and weight management that center around lifestyle and positive behavior choices. So without further ado, let's roll to episode 73.
I'd like to welcome Carol Addy, Chief Medical Officer of HMR and former pro cyclist, to the Leo Training Podcast. Carol, thanks so much for taking the time to come on to the show.
Joe, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, me too. This one's been in the works for a little while, and got to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Brent Morehouse, for introducing us and everything.
Oh, we should have tried for a three-way interview and gotten him on the call as well.
I know, right? We should have. But we've got a really good interview in store for the audience. So as always, I like to turn the mic over to my guest and give them, a couple minutes to introduce themselves, share their background, their roots, both professionally and athletically, and kind of let the audience know who you are and what you're up to and where you're located.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I guess if you were to describe me, or I guess I should say I have been described as a fitness passionista. And I think that probably, even though it may not be a word, I think it does summarize who I am, in that it really describes my personal passion for lifestyle and for fitness. And we'll talk a little bit about my history as a professional cyclist and as a long distance runner, and now currently as a kettlebell sport competitor. But as well, I think that passion has carried over and has served as the inspiration for my professional life, and was really the basis for my going into medicine, so that I could share that passion with my patients. And now working as Chief Medical Officer for HMR, which is an organization that is committed to and has a corporate mission to work with individuals to really optimize their lifestyle for weight management and for health management. So I feel like that passionista is who I am, and it really resonates both in my personal and professional lives.
That's outstanding. Really, you got an incredible story to share. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into this. And Let's kind of lay things out a little bit and start with your athletic career as a pro cyclist, because like you said, that kind of was a catalyst for a lot of things that happened later on professionally.
Yeah, it really was, Joe. So I went to undergraduate college in Central Ohio at Otterbein College, and I was pursuing an undergraduate degree in art. And as I was getting ready to wrap up my degree, I discovered my bike. And every spare moment I was out riding on the country roads of Central Ohio. Of course, all of those are now built in with developments. But at the time, there was just miles and miles and miles of country roads. And as luck would have it, I went down to Ohio State University one rainy spring day and watched my first bicycle race. And a light bulb went off in my head and probably more importantly in my heart. And I said, oh my God, I have to do this. And much to my parents' dismay, I took my undergraduate degree and put it on the shelf and was piecing together waitressing jobs and working in fast food restaurants so I could fuel the initiation of my passion for bike racing, which at the time in the early 80s, women's cycling was in its infancy. And to be part of that was just incredible, great opportunity. Women's cycling was offered as the first time event in the Olympics in 1984. And I had the good fortune to compete in the Olympic trials and to be part of that whole movement. And although I didn't make the team, I know some of the women who did make the team. And so just to have been part of that was very special. And as well, during the course of cycling, I had the good fortune to work for some of my sponsors as a health and fitness spokesperson. And I have to say that was really where in my heart, I felt this passion for wanting to share what I had come to appreciate in myself in terms of my fitness and my lifestyle and sharing that more broadly with others. And so long story short, there's something about the reality of turning 30 that makes one look carefully in the mirror to try to understand what might be next in terms of perhaps a real career. And that was really the basis for my deciding to pursue a career in medicine, because I really felt that lifestyle not only is a great way to prevent diseases, but in many ways is an important adjunct or foundation for treatment of many diseases. And I wanted to share that with my patients.
I love it. So you definitely take a kind of a movement is medicine approach to lifestyle and health.
Well, I took that to heart because I actually used to take my prescription pad out of my white jacket and I would write my patients prescriptions for exercise. And so probably very much not what they were expecting. I'm sure they were expecting their prescription for their blood pressure lowering medication or their diabetes medication. And sometimes I did have to write that, but they always got a prescription for exercise as well.
Wow. So I have to ask, because I think that's fantastic. And I hope, more medical professionals out there, kind of take that lead. But what are some of the reactions that you would get when you would hand them that slip of paper and that would be their prescription, aka their potential training program?
Well, I got some pretty strange looks, I'll admittedly. And that also really fueled my frustration with the medical system, because the medical system and medical education is not set up to teach providers about lifestyle. And so there's lack of training, and importantly, there's lack of time during visits. And that became quickly a source of frustration for me as I was seeing patients, that there just wasn't sufficient time to have those types of discussions. And I think you touched upon another thing as well in terms of healthcare providers really serving as important role models to their patients. And so many times providers are saying, do as I say, but not necessarily as I do. And healthcare providers really need to be walking the talk, if you will, and following the same behaviors that they're advocating for their patients. There's even a lot of research literature that is very supportive of this, and I'm very much committed to it. In fact, I'm giving a grand rounds presentation at one of our clinic-based programs in Missouri next week. The title of the talk is "Why Wait to Talk to Your Patients About Their Weight."
That's excellent. That's really cool. Well, if you would, is it going to be taped or anything, or live? Is it going to be put on YouTube afterwards?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It's actually at a restaurant setting, so I tend to think not, because yeah. So probably a lot of dinnerware clanking that might not lend itself to being taped.
Okay, no, that's cool. I was just curious. It'd be if it was something that was being recorded, it'd be great to share that with the audience. So that way they can take that piece of education and become a little bit more informed themselves and hopefully put it to good use.
Sure.
So in terms of your career, so you're 30 years old, you're figuring out what the next step is for you. Did you kind of know initially what area of medicine that you wanted to focus in? When did that kind of become a little bit more clear for you?
Yeah, I've never been one to have a firmly outlined and methodical plan. So I was kind of swept along with my various rotations in medical school. And honestly, I think I would have gone into plastic surgery if it hadn't been for the fact at the time I would have had to do a complete general surgery residency. And I wasn't really keen on that. And so I really was intrigued by internal medicine because it really looks at individuals in the totality. And I was really fascinated by how all the body systems interacted with one another. And then ultimately, I really became hooked with endocrinology, particularly it was aligned with my interest in metabolism, which I think is very much aligned with exercise and fitness.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, how has that, what you studied, as you're going through your education and then in the residency, how has that kind of influenced your work at HMR now?
Right. So there was another step in between. So during my completion of my residency and then ultimately my endocrinology fellowship, I had the very good fortune of completing a master's program at Harvard Medical School that was geared towards clinical research. And I'd never done any research before. And so I saw it as just a great opportunity to either come to appreciate it, or on the other side, if I didn't like it, it could be something that I would cross off my list. So I ended up loving research, and it really served as my inspiration to want to pursue that as part of my career. And then I was juggling whether I wanted to stay in academic medicine, which I was a little bit nervous about because I was relatively older compared to my peers and still had significant student loan debt. The alternative and the path that I chose was to go to work for Merck Research Laboratories, Merck being the pharmaceutical company. And so I was able to transpose the skills and my passion for lifestyle in working in the development of drugs for the treatment of obesity and diabetes, which of course are always prescribed on a backdrop of lifestyle intervention. So still, although in some ways someone might look at that and say, well, you're working for a drug company, it's always on that backdrop of lifestyle, which still was very much aligned with my personal interests.
That's great. So you really try to emphasize to individuals that you're working with they got to start with lifestyle changes and behavioral changes first before factoring in any type of prescription drug.
That's exactly right. And in fact, if people take the time to look at the package inserts and the fine print, it is always in there. Unfortunately, many people pay lip service to it because it's so hard for many people to achieve. And why is that? So the prescribers, the physicians and healthcare providers don't have the training, as we talked. And as well, it's hard for many people to make lifestyle changes because they don't have the skills to do so. And I think that's where I really appreciate my background as an athlete, because those skills are in many ways baked into who I am.
Yes.
But I'm not quick to take that for granted, because when we look at the world around us, many people don't have that good fortune. And so that's where whether we're working in the healthcare industry or the fitness industry, and we have the opportunity to work with individuals, we can help them acquire those skills, which are so important for lifelong learning and maintaining lifelong fitness.
That's outstanding. That's great. So clearly that's something that's been infused into your work at HMR.
Right. So HMR stands for Health Management Resources. Our programs are delivered primarily to help individuals lose weight and to manage their weight long term, by means of helping them to acquire those lifestyle skills, really focusing on simple skills, helping them to control their environment. We all acknowledge that we don't live in a world that's conducive to managing our weight, and it does require skills to understand how we can learn to control the world that we're living in. How can we incorporate physical activity in the course of our crazy days? How can we make good food choices? And so that's really what our programs do, through clinic-based programs where coaching is delivered face-to-face, and where we can medically supervise patients if they need, depending on their medical conditions, or alternatively, more flexibly offered programs where coaching is delivered weekly by telephone in a group setting. So very, very efficacious across the board, whether it's remote or face-to-face.
That's great. That's outstanding. Yeah. So really providing some flexibility of options to those who might be interested.
Exactly. And then, of course, we do live in a do-it-yourself world. So many folks really want to be doing a program on their own without having to interact with a health coach. And so for those individuals, we offer self-directed programs, which as well are very efficacious, at least being able to deliver weight loss that is clinically significant. And that's typically in the range of 5 to 10% body weight loss.
Wow. So yeah, so you have pretty much an option for any type of individual, depending on their preferred tastes of what they want to do, whether it's coaching or do it yourself. So that there's something for everybody.
Well, and I think it's a very important point, because we know that weight management is not one size fits all. And I think to have a breadth of options is really critical in order to be able to serve the needs of the most folks.
Yeah, no, totally. That is a very critical point, because, what works for one person may not work for another. You have to really individualize programming down to, that specific person, their schedule, family, work life. There's a lot of other factors that come into play. So, in terms of, some of the programs, I guess a great question would be, what if somebody's brand new, what's the entry point for them? How would they start out? Do they go through like an assessment or a questionnaire, or are they talking to someone, in person or on the telephone? How does that work?
All of the above. So we have close to 100 clinic-based programs throughout the country. And so if someone lives in close proximity to a clinic, this information is available on our website, then they could go to an information session at one of those clinics in order to find out the breadth of the program options. So we have meal plans that are very highly structured, and that would include very low calorie diets, 500 to 800 calories per day, or low calorie diets, ranging from 800 to 1,000 calories per day. These are typically for individuals seeking to lose 50 or more pounds of weight, highly structured. and require medical supervision, as typically these folks have very complicated or complex medical history. So these clinic-based programs afford the opportunity for physician and nursing visits to ensure that medications are adjusted, for example. So we not uncommonly will see patients with diabetes. Many of them, if not most of them, are able to discontinue one or more of their diabetes medications. Contrasting that with my former role as an endocrinologist, where I was seeing patients with diabetes, adding medications, dialing up insulin doses. So the clinic-based programs are really terrific for those folks. For those who are interested in more flexibility, we talked about the remote program option. Again, information about the remote program with the telephone-based coaching is available online. This program uses a more moderately restricted diet plan ranging from about 1,200 to 1,600 calories per day, with a huge emphasis on fresh fruits and vegetables, which not only provides a great volume effect, but is also great in terms of nutrient density with low calorie density. So really getting a trifecta with fruits and vegetables. All of our programs work with folks to increase their physical activity to get 2,000 kilocalories or more per week. More is better, of course. And so we work with folks to dial up their what we call PA for physical activity. Many are just getting this in through walking, as many of our participants are completely sedentary when they start the program.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you just brought up there, because sometimes I feel like people disregard walking, and they're kind of like, they feel like, if somebody's been sedentary or they're just completely deconditioned, they haven't done anything for a very long time. You can't just go 0 to 100. Like you really have to take some steps and do it slowly, and build up that foundation again.
Exactly.
Yeah, and walking's fantastic. People really, they don't kind of give it enough credit, but that's one of the things that I recommend to some of my students or clients in person, that are trying to do weight loss, and we focus on movement and strength in the facility, and outside of that, my time with them, they're walking on their own. And it has great benefit, and I can see the results, and so can they.
I agree with that, and it's interesting. I still incorporate walking into my routine on occasion. Great recovery activity, very easy on the joints, and after a hard kettlebell session or two, I'm really ready for I need to move my body, but it's not going to involve a kettlebell.
Yes, and it's Dr. Stuart McGill has a great quote in I think his book Back Mechanic, but I've heard him say it in person too. But it's walking's like nature's balm. So it's like it really helps to lubricate the joints, the hips and the shoulders and everything. And you go for 15, 20, 30-minute walk. You get done. You really feel warm from the center out.
Exactly. So coming back to HMR, we're very fond of walking meetings, and it's not uncommon that somebody will pop in my door and say, "Would you like to go for a walking break?" So it's great to know that I'm working for a company that is walking the talk.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, so one other question I have is, so when working with these individuals that might be interested in the programs, what are potentially some typical behaviors or habits that we're trying to readjust or break, and build new skill sets, get rid of habits that may not be conducive to, a healthy lifestyle?
Right. So one of the things that I made mention of is environment control. And so we live in a world where fast food is king, portion sizes are out of control, and our programs are set up so that we have highly structured, natured programs in the beginning during weight loss, which we call phase one. And what we do is provide our participants portion controlled foods, including shakes, entrees, bars, and then depending on the meal plan, fruits and vegetables. And what we do is work with them to stay, quote unquote, in the box. That's their meal prescription. That helps to crowd out the don't do's. We focus on the to do behaviors and eliminate the myriad of don't do behaviors. And it's during that time period that we work on the environment. So acknowledging that we can't buy certain foods because we know that it's too great of temptation. We work with folks to plan ahead if they're going to a social event. What could they look at the menu in advance to figure out what healthy selections may be available to them so they don't fall into a bad habit. For those would be specific examples. How can they work to build physical activity into their day? So our health coaches work with participants to come up with a weekly plan and hold them accountable. So, Joe, what are you planning to do to get in your bout of physical activity on Saturday? Last Saturday, you were really challenged. What are you planning to do this Saturday to eliminate those barriers to your getting in a good bout of PA? And then we'll talk about that next week. I want to make sure that you're accountable to your actions.
That's great. Yeah, I like that. There's a lot of structure to the program, and the big thing, like you said there, accountability.
Exactly. It's a lot easier to be accountable to someone else. Some rare individuals can be accountable to themselves, and that's not to say that our program participants can't do that over time. But initially, when the skill building and the skill acquisition is occurring, so much easier to lay those foundations in working with a coach to whom folks are accountable.
Yeah, for sure. Now, is there a critical time? Like, do you see more success like when somebody's first starting a program, if they're adopting and making these changes to their behaviors and habits and lifestyles, compared to like if somebody's like either resistant or they're not making the changes, they don't have as much success. Like, is that a critical feature?
Absolutely. So HMR had the good fortune of being named to the U.S. News and World Report Best Diet Rankings the last 2 years, and number one for best fast weight loss. And so think about it, Joe, if you're trying to lose weight, are you going to be more motivated with fast weight loss, which is going to really reinforce the skills, or are you going to be motivated with slower weight loss where the temptation, you're not as motivated, temptations may be greater? So we do see very rapid weight loss, which is very motivating to folks. And we find that those folks who are following the structure of the program tend to do far better. We use pre-portioned meals. And interestingly enough, those folks who are using 30% more of the portion control foods are losing 40% more weight. So somewhat counterintuitive, you would think these people are eating more, but they're actually losing more weight. And why is that? Because the portion control foods are protecting them from the foods that are available in the surrounding environment. Right.
That's great. Yeah. So really helping to build in some discipline early on and see some quick wins, so to speak.
Well, that's exactly right. And then over time, so once an individual loses the weight that they're seeking to lose, they would transition to the weight maintenance portion of the program, where portion controlled foods are still used strategically but more healthy foods are introduced, like lean proteins, whole grains, and of course, still a huge emphasis on fruits and vegetables.
Excellent, excellent. Is there like one thing, that comes to mind, like like actionable piece of advice that you would give someone that is trying to, lose weight, that they should be trying to make in terms of a habit or a lifestyle change? Like, is a good starting point?
Well, you can't go wrong with fruits and vegetables. So we work with folks to get in 5 full cup servings of fruits and vegetables. Again, a lot of volume there. So that really creates a very good satiety effect, crowding out other unhealthy food choices, nutrient density, low calorie density. So that combined with physical activity, that's really the foundation of our program. So I think that's the mainstay. How you do that is really contingent upon, like we talked about, it's not one size fits all. And so really trying to find a program that works for you.
Right. Yeah, that's interestingly enough, that's one change that I've kind of made to my own, eating choices in the last probably say like 3 to 4 months. Like I probably for the past, I'd say 7 or 8 years, I would eat eggs like every day, like all the time. And go out, and I'd have like pancakes or French toast or something like that occasionally. But I usually ate like a good amount of eggs, 5 or 6 eggs with, vegetables or some type of lean protein in the morning. And in the last 3 or 4 months, I'm almost exclusively eat a bowl with a bunch of fresh cut fruit and a little bit of granola and like maybe some hemp seeds, but mostly it's probably 90% fresh fruit. And I mix it up, strawberries, blueberries, mango, pineapple, watermelon, whatever's in season, whatever I can get, but fresh fruit every morning. And to your point, I am full. I don't have any like cravings. And I eat that, like I get up early in the morning, like I'll get up at 4:30. I'll go to the gym. I might have coffee some days I don't, depending on the training session. Do my own training session, come back, get ready for work, shower. And I don't eat breakfast until like 9 a.m. And I'm not starving. I'm not like hungry. And I just have that bowl of fruit, and I'm usually good till about 12:30 or 1 o'clock. And then I'll have my lunch, and then I'll come home and have dinner. And so what I've noticed is that, compared to when I was having like eggs, I felt like it like ramped up my metabolism a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like for me anyway, I was very hungry, like mid to late morning. And like, by the time I got to like lunch, I was ready to like, bite my elbow off my arm. Whereas now I have fruit and, it feels like a much, higher energy level, steadier burn, and I don't drop down. Like I don't have the spikes like I used to.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, it's as I was waiting for us to start our discussion, I was doing my own food prep, and so I've got 2 pans of vegetables sitting in the oven waiting for me to turn it on. So that's dinner tonight. Yep.
Yes, yeah, veggies are great. Yeah, I mean that's probably another big change is that I've eaten. I'm eating more fruits and vegetables as I've gotten older, and I typically try to eat. I shouldn't say protein because that's not accurate. Meat probably once a day. I still have protein, but I try to cut down on the amount of meat I have and have more fruits and vegetables.
Right.
And it's easier. I think it's easier on the body in terms of digestion and processing it. But I also just in terms of the phytonutrients that you get from those types of things feel fantastic.
Well, I had to travel last week to Dallas for my job, and I was attending a conference, and so painful because food choices are never great at conferences. And so couldn't wait to get back into my routine and be back in my kitchen. And I think that's another thing too, is eat at home. We have so much more control over what we're eating when we're doing our shopping and preparing our own food. I think that is a huge lessons learned, and that I've come to appreciate. I know I'm eating far more healthy now, compared to previous years when my husband twisted my arm and made me go out. If I do go out, I do try to look ahead and see what is available so that I can make somewhat of a healthy choice.
Sure. Do you have any on that note? Do you have any suggestions or tips if people are traveling? So that way, like you said, you have a little bit less control when you're on the road, going to a conference or traveling for work. Like, what do you try to do to make sure that you're still carrying those good habits and you don't okay, well, the easiest thing to do is go to the restaurant and eat out.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's a challenge. So this conference that I went to, one of the first things I did is I went to visit the gym to see what facilities were available. And like you, I work out first thing in the morning, and so I kept that routine. And so I would highly recommend that. In terms of eating options, I was in a monstrous hotel, so at least there were actually some healthy food choices. I just needed to look for them. And so again, I scoured menus for all of the different restaurants just to see where the best options would be, where the kiosks were available, where instead of all the candy bar selection, they actually had fresh fruit available, and where we had some breakout sessions during the conference. If there were fruits available, I was stockpiling them into my bag.
Awesome. That's great.
Yes. And drinking a lot of water as well. I think it's so easy to be underhydrated when traveling. And so my key is to buy a big bottle at the airport after I've been through security, and I hold on to that bottle. And then it's easy to fill it up for free at the hotel gym, using their water cooler. And that way you don't have to pay that. But you can and I try to make sure that I get in 64 ounces a day.
Excellent. Outstanding. I had another question pop up there that you just made me think of. Oh darn, it escapes me at the moment. But well, that's great. That's all actionable advice that people can use and put to good use. So is there anything else you want to touch on in terms of behavior, lifestyle changes in regards to weight loss before talking a little bit more about kettlebell sport?
No, I think just the lifestyle piece, it's not one size fits all. And so I think just to listen to what works for others, try it on for size, see if it works for you, and then just really understand what is sustainable. And so what may work for you, I may try, and I may say, okay, well, that's good for a week, but I'm not good for much longer. But really looking to identify what works and what you can reasonably sustain over the long haul. And I think research studies have even verified that. There was a study that was performed at Harvard Medical School that looked at diets of varying macronutrient content, high protein, low carbohydrate, etc. They were all equally as efficacious in achieving weight loss. So the take-home point is no diet is superior. It's what works for you and what you can sustain over the long haul.
That's outstanding. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is it possible to get a link to that?
Yeah, I'll make a note and I'll send that to you. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So on that note, we'll shift gears. Kind of a different topic. So let's talk about what got you interested in, I guess, kettlebells, and then also going from hard style into kettlebell sport.
Sure. Well, so reflecting back to when I was in medical school, I couldn't continue cycling just because I needed an activity that was more time efficient. Sure. So when I was bike racing, not uncommonly, I'd be spending 2-3 hours out on the road, and that was just not feasible during medical school and residency. So it was a natural transition for me to running long distance, and that was all well and good. easy for me to do shorter runs during the week, longer runs on the weekend. I ended up doing a few marathons that I never thought I could do because I was always kind of a sprinter, jumper, hurdler when I was competing in high school. And that was great because I loved running and really was almost a source of meditation for me, particularly those long weekend runs as I was ramping up for a marathon, for example. But the tincture of time was not good to me, and that the injuries really started to creep up. And I always joke to my husband, I said, I feel like I'm just in a case of Addyitis looking for a place to happen. So it was like tendonitis, bursitis. So I got to the point where I was feeling like I was injured more often than not. And that prompted me to start working out with a personal trainer just to see if I could maybe do some be more proactive in preventing injuries if I had any muscle imbalances, what have you. And he introduced me to kettlebells. And I, as a kid, while I was in competing in track and field in high school, I lifted weights with the proverbial universal gym. But I always loved lifting weights. And so it just really struck a chord in me, and it was something that I continued to do on my own. I bought my first kettlebells from Ocean State Job Lot for some, insanely cheap price, and I still have some of those kettlebells. And I was really nervous because I was no longer working with a trainer. I wanted to make sure that I was doing the proper technique because last thing I wanted was to get injured again. Sure. And so that prompted me to start looking around online, and I discovered Skill of Strength in Chelmsford, and I scheduled some sessions with Mike Perry because I just wanted to work on my technique. I saw that he, at the time, was RKC certified, so that meant a lot. I wanted to work with someone who was certified. And lo and behold, he said, well, there's this new organization called Strong First, and they have a certification up and coming in a few months. Maybe you should think about doing that. And so that's exactly what I did. Is I got Strong First certified back in 2013. Which was just such a terrific experience. I felt far more confident in my skills. And although I don't work in the fitness industry, I certainly have friends who were interested in learning about kettlebells. So I felt far more confident in showing them and teaching them, and hopefully to do so in a safe manner.
Outstanding. So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I know that's only part of the journey. We still got some more to go, but it's just amazing stuff.
Yep. So as I continued to create my own programs, I picked up a book, a kettlebell book, had some workouts in it, and it was authored by a woman, Lorna Kleidman. And come to find out, Lorna Kleidman is a world champion kettlebell sport competitor. In fact, I competed at the Arnold Classic earlier this month, and she set an American record there. And so that's how I actually discovered kettlebell sport, because as I was looking her up online and reading about her, I saw these little video clips of this oddball sport, and I was trying to make heads or tails of it because the kettlebells looked so big compared to the hard style kettlebells. But I was intrigued by it because it appeared that it was more of an endurance event, and that's exactly what it is. So it took me a couple of years to really get up my gumption to try it, but I competed in my first kettlebell sport event back in at the end of 2015. There was a relatively local event down in Scituate, Mass.
Outstanding. So what event did you compete in at the Arnold Classic?
I did the one-arm biathlon. And so the kettlebell sport events are basically 10-minute lifts. And the aim during that 10 minutes is to do as many repetitions as possible with one hand switch. That's a real challenge, particularly for the snatch. So I competed in the biathlon, which is actually two different lifts, the one-arm jerk and the snatch. And it's total number of reps for each of those lifts that contributes to the overall score.
Oh, wow. So is that 10 minutes total, or are you taking a break in between those two, right?
It's 10-minute totals for each lift, and then the lifts are separated typically by half hour to an hour. It really depends on the size of the event.
Oh,
But
wow.
I think it's a minimum of a half hour.
So you earned your dinner that day.
Oh, I most certainly did.
Well,
I most certainly did.
outstanding. How'd it go? How'd you do?
Well, I got PRs in both of my lifts.
Very
I
nice.
didn't quite keep the pace that I had hoped for, but I got PRs in both lifts, and so there's always room for improvement. And what I found is that kettlebell sport, because it's an endurance event, it's really about maximum efficiency. Unlike hardstyle kettlebell, where it's maximum power and maximum tension. And so that really takes some getting used to and really working to refine technique in order to become most efficient, particularly as it pertains to grip strength. Because when you think about the lifts, snatch, for example, grip can sometimes be the first thing to go, particularly if you're trying to get to 5 minutes with the first hand before you switch to the other hand.
Wow. So have you been doing anything to improve like grip endurance or overall grip strength? And if so, what are some of those things outside of kind of just the lift, like supplementary or accessory exercises?
Right. Well, I've been working with my coach, Chris Duffy. He's located up in Beverly, Mass, and he has a long-standing history in competing in kettlebell sport, and he actually trains with one of the world's best lifters. And so Chris will write my workouts, and I have to say it's probably one of my least favorite accessory movements, but I do farmer's carries with heavy kettlebells and just try to go as long as I can, carrying the kettlebells in the hooks of my fingers, because that's the exact same position at the bottom of the snatch.
Excellent. Very cool. Anything else you want to touch on in regards to kettlebell sport? Well, actually, you know what? I have a question for you. So
Fire away.
So, as an endurance athlete, right, the running and the cycling, right? What is your take? How does that compare to kettlebell sport in terms of like the feeling that you're going through, like physically? You know, like if you're racing or training for like 2 to 3 hours, this is 10 minutes, so obviously it's not the same in that regard. But that idea of endurance, like I have to go at a very high intensity for a long amount of time. In this regard, you're doing it with, a weight, and you're going for reps. So it's a little bit different than in cycling or rowing or running, but there's the technical proficiency, one could argue is even more important because of the weight component.
Exactly. So I think that there are some analogies there for sure. So certainly the technical aspects. So even though I've ridden my bike for many, many years and have thousands and thousands of miles under my belt, I still kind of fixate on my pedaling technique and, trying to get the perfect pedal stroke. So that's very analogous to kettlebell sport, where huge component of technique in terms of optimizing efficiency. Now, in terms of analogy to the endurance aspect, I would say kettlebell sport, because of the relatively short duration and higher intensity of the event, probably more analogous to a track cycling event. And as well, there's a huge component of pacing. So, for example, I am going to be competing this weekend at an event down at the Noskov Fitness in Montvale, New Jersey. And I'm also going to be doing the biathlon. So I'm honing in on my paces for both of my lifts, because it's not dissimilar to, say, running a mile. So if you go and blow out and do the first quarter, at warp speed, you're going to blow up in the second or third lap. So the same thing, that pacing is really critical to be able to go the full distance, or in this case, the full duration of the set. Yeah,
I got to imagine. And yeah, I haven't trained for it or done it yet, but I have to imagine it's a lot different when you go out hard on a bike or running or in a rowing race, and you kind of fatigue and you can feel your technique kind of slipping away. Whereas in this situation, it's a little different when there's like a big heavy weight over your head. So,
well, that's just it. So cycling, you can always coast, right? Unless you're on a track bike, of course. So you can't coast when you have a kettlebell. Other than, the equivalent of the coast would be the overhead lockout, but that's not really the same as coasting, if you know what I mean. You can only Exactly. And that's actually a component of training in certain terms of the accessory work, because as you can imagine, that is a rest position. And so not uncommonly, Chris, my coach, will have me do overhead holds for a minute or longer, just to get comfortable and try to be as effortless as possible in that overhead lockout position.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Any parting thoughts on kettlebell sport or GS?
Well, I think in some ways kettlebell sport is like women's cycling was when I first got involved. I really see it as growing and blossoming, and I know that there are some people that are really pushing to ultimately get this into the Olympics. Don't know when or if that will happen, but it's really blossoming. And I think if folks have a chance to see a kettlebell competition, it's really a lot of fun, and just to appreciate the strength, the endurance of the athletes. At the Arnold, there were some of the best lifters in the world, and they just made it look effortless. And it's just well worth watching.
Very cool. Very cool. You ready for the rapid fire?
Okay.
Awesome. So, Carol, given all of your knowledge and your experience at this point in your life and in your career, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
Follow your heart.
Love it. Okay, if you had to pick
Follow your heart.
Excellent.
Yep.
Excellent. If you had to pick one, what's your favorite strength training exercise?
I would say probably deadlifts.
Okay. Excellent. How has your training changed today compared to 15 years ago?
Far more efficient.
Awesome.
Get in, get the sets done, get it done.
Yes.
No dilly-dallying.
I love it. Have you ever had an injury? And if so, how did that affect your training? You kind of touched on that earlier, but I wasn't sure if there's a specific injury.
Oh, I have a very good story there. I'll try to be brief. Last summer, I developed a severe infection in my foot that required surgery. It was my right foot. I couldn't drive and I couldn't bear weight for 3 months. And so I found my silver lining in that I couldn't do anything weight bearing, but it was great for core and upper body work. And I think I came out of that stronger than ever. And when I finally got back to swinging bells, I was very close to where I had left off. I hadn't lost much at all. So I think that things sometimes happen for a reason. And I think that we just need to not focus on what we can't do, but focus on what we can do. And the results can really be amazing.
That's great. Besides the push-ups, what did you do for core work?
I did push-ups, pull-ups. I did a lot of half get-ups. So I kept the bell over my head as much as I could. I just kept working with the bell in whatever I did, bent over rows. I would actually do some kind of practice snatch sets, not with the bell, but just sitting on my bench and just practicing the pacing, because that's so important. And I think that really helped me to really hone in on my technique. Part of the snatch is really about weight shifting. And so that allowed me to really focus on that. So there was definitely a silver lining, even though at the time I didn't really appreciate it as such.
Excellent. Very cool. What is one thing that junior athletes should be doing more of to complement their training and their health?
I think just trying to achieve balance. And I think that's one of the things that I've really come to appreciate in my current life is that I have a great balance between my professional and personal life. And I don't think that I would appreciate my sporting endeavors if that's all I did. And similarly, I don't think that I would appreciate my career as much if I was so immersed in my career. So I think that just really trying to explore all opportunities and to achieve balance, I think that that's really important to not lose sight of.
Fantastic. What's your best tip to improve recovery after a training session?
My foam roller is a good buddy of mine. And then I treat myself to deep tissue massage at OrthoMed Massage Therapy in Northborough once a week. And it really does wonders in terms of keeping me out of trouble. I can certainly have my massage therapist, Ashley, hone in on the hot spots and work out the knots, which can become bigger problems if I don't tend to them right away.
What's your favorite meal?
Oh, man. It's a toss-up between a big bowl of Brussels sprouts, roasted Brussels sprouts, or kale. I think I'd have to go with the Brussels sprouts.
You totally love your vegetables.
I do. They're like candy to me. I can't wait to turn on my oven. They're waiting for me.
2 more questions and then you're off the hook.
Yeah.
What's one book everyone should read? Any genre.
Oh, boy. That's a good one. Boy, I'm coming up short there. You know why? Do you know why? Because I get up at 4:00 every morning, and the amount of time that I have to read is limited to about the 5 minutes that I can keep my eyes open before my eyes.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, I know you do. I sense that you're a kindred spirit.
Okay. Well, we'll table that one. That's all right.
Okay.
Last question. Who have you studied or do you continue to study in your career to improve and get better?
In my career, well, I am working with Dr. Bruce Sherman, who works at Case Western University. He is a role model and career mentor for me. He is a thought leader in the world of workforce health. And in my job at HMR, I've really come to appreciate the importance of employers working to optimize the health of their workforce. And, we spend most of our hours as adults. Most of us are working full time, and that's where we're spending most of our time is in the workplace. And so what can employers do to really enable employees to create healthy habits and to optimize their lifestyle? So Bruce has been a terrific mentor for me.
Oh, awesome. That's so great. Very cool. Well, Carol, that takes us to the end of the interview. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Joe, it's been a pleasure. It's been a blast. I wish we had another hour. Maybe we'll create another topic at some point.
Yes, no, absolutely. We will for sure. But just hang on the line. Let me give you a proper goodbye off air.
Okay, great.
I hope you enjoyed this brand new episode of the Leo Training Podcast. If you enjoyed the content, please take a moment of your time, head on over to iTunes and drop in a 5-star review. Or, better yet, share it on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And be sure to tune in next week when I have another brand new episode. My guest is Australian and Olympian current world record holder on the Concept 2 ergometer, Sam Locke.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.